We begin this morning with the growing backlash against Donald Trump's nearly $1.8 billion so-called anti-weaponization fund. That is the fund that Vice President J.D. Vance and Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche could not unequivocally say would not be used to give taxpayer dollars to convicted January 6 rioters, including those who violently attacked law enforcement officers. It is being described as, quote, utterly stupid, morally wrong, unexplainable, a galactic blunder, and stupid on stilts. But what is different in the outrage against Trump's latest abuse of the presidency is that all of those comments came from lawmakers in Trump's own party. It's something we've rarely seen during this administration, but apparently this is a line that is becoming too far for even Republicans to cross. Blanche failed to win over Senate Republicans in a closed-door meeting on Thursday. Yesterday, Senator Ted Cruz described it as, quote, one of the roughest meetings I've seen in my entire time in the Senate. Fiery does not begin to cut it, Cruz said. My guess is there are probably 45 senators in the room. At least half of them were blasting the attorney general, and they were pissed. Coming from Ted Cruz, that's saying a lot. There were multiple senators yelling at the attorney general, saying this feels like self-dealing. And it's not just Senate Republicans pushing back. We are also seeing some signs of resistance from their colleagues in the House. There's now a bipartisan bill to block this fund, co-authored by Republican Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick. Whether it'll ever be brought to the floor for a vote is yet to be seen. In response to the backlash, Trump posted yesterday, quote, I gave up a lot of money in allowing the just announced anti-weaponization fund to go forward. I could have settled my case, including the illegal release of my tax returns and the equally illegal break-in of Mar-a-Lago for an absolute fortune. Instead, I am helping others who were so badly abused by an evil, corrupt, and weaponized Biden administration receive at long last justice, President DJT. And I was quoting there. Joining us now, Ali Vitale, host of Way Too Early, MS Now senior congressional reporter and my office mate, and Jeff Mason, White House correspondent for Bloomberg.
Whose office mate am I?
We'll all take you.
Come on over, Jeff.
Small couch that I already said no to.
All right, Ali.
Farm it out.
I found it very rich that Senator Cruz was saying that meeting with the acting attorney general was the roughest meeting he has been in his entire time in the Senate. And he's like one of the most disliked people in the Senate. So I'm sure he has heard his fair share of rough language. But was it as rough as the senator describes?
Yes. And the fact that Ted Cruz would wait until his podcast to make that criticism, I think, is notable. But we did hear Republican senators immediately coming out of the room saying, at best, they had some questions for the acting attorney general, and at worst, that they were concerned about this fund, and that key appropriators like Senator Susan Collins said that they were not convinced about the need for it in the first place. And I think that it comes in tandem with the fact that we're now seeing pushback on the $1 billion for a ballroom that should have been in this reconciliation package. We're seeing Republican and Democratic pushback alike to the existence of this fund, whether or not they can do a bill that would restrict it or just make it not exist anymore. I think that is an open question. There's also court proceedings to that effect, too. But it all really begs the question on Capitol Hill, as they left town, by the way, not doing the reconciliation package that should have just been an easy, targeted approach on immigration. Is this the moment that Republicans finally realize their political moment in the midterms diverges so aggressively from the president's, and are they ready to at least start not agreeing in lockstep? Right. Because this shouldn't be notable that they're saying, hey, this isn't money that we approved to go to rioters that endangered many of our lives on January 6, 2021. It's just notable in this era of Washington where they've completely capitulated to the White House.
By vanquishing his perceived enemies this week in these primaries, he's seemingly made others on Capitol Hill. Mm-hmm. Also, I think it's very interesting that the senators yelling at Todd Blanche, but take that same energy down to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue to where the actual issue, the guy that you have beef with is actually Donald Trump. Mr. Mason.
Yes, sir.
I want to make you answer that question. I do want to throw up the
Question is why?
exactly the name of the folks who have already said they're planning to file for compensation for this fund. Enrique Tarrio, convicted seditionist and leader of the far-right Proud Boys. He seeks up to $5 million. Michael Cohen, who's been on this show a couple of times, convicted January 6 rioters. Brandon Fellow seeks $30 million. Yvonne St. Cyr, $10 million. Trennis Evans seeks more than $1 million. Michael Caputo, Sam Nunberg, these are folks who worked for Donald Trump. Roger Stone, folks know those names. How is the administration, especially with someone like Enrique Tarrio, how's this White House defending him possibly getting money from the American taxpayer?
Well, they're just largely defending the fund. And you saw the defense that President Trump put out in that Truth Social post. I mean, he had said at one point this week that he had nothing to do with the negotiations that led to that.
Do you believe that?
It's not my job to say what I believe or I don't believe, but it's contradictory.
Yeah.
You can say that with just clear reporting from what he said. At one point he said he wasn't involved, and then he said, I could have gotten a lot more. That certainly indicates that he was involved and had a hand in either in the negotiations or at least was informed about it and was weighing in. So they are defending it writ large as something that is right and as something that he wants. And yet it's created all of these political risks for him.
Yeah.
Jeff, I want to stick with you for a second because just even being at the White House this week, it was sort of remarkable how much the conversation was not focused at all on any of the pushback from Republican senators, at least amongst the White House officials and the senior administration officials that I was in touch with, which I think sort of speaks to this idea that we always come back to, which is what Steve Bannon called when Steve Bannon made the comparison of the U.S. Congress to the Russian Duma, right? That at the end of the day, they might have an angry, ornery, closed-door meeting, but are they actually going to take up Brian Fitzpatrick's anti-weaponization bill? And, John Thune saying that this is water under the bridge. Is it actually water under the bridge? What are they going to come back next week and do? And I guess what are you hearing from your White House sources about sort of their current view of the legislative body at the other side of Pennsylvania Avenue?
I think that's a spot-on question, and I would use a similar answer to the one that I gave Eugene. If you look at history, if you look at precedents, how has this White House, how has this president dealt with Republicans on the Hill? Occasionally they'll get some griping, and then they'll move on, or they'll shut it down. So if Republicans, if Republicans decide we're so angry about this, we're ready to break with the president, we're ready to support this law, we're ready to create a legislative fix that says no, we're not giving a $1.8 billion to this group of people at a time when our constituents are upset about the cost of gasoline, the cost of housing, the cost of groceries, then they have a mechanism to do that. But history would show that's not the mechanism, or that's not the pathway they're going to choose.
And you know why? Because, past is prologue, Jeff. Let's play some top Republican lawmakers, what they had to say after the January 6th attack, and then it'll put into perfect perspective what Jeff was just talking about.
All I can say is count me out. Enough is enough. If you're a conservative, this is the most offensive concept in the world, that a single person could disenfranchise 155 million people.
The president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters. He should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding.
There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. No question about it.
And so this is why, to the point of Jackie's question, it's like, why do we even believe that these folks, when they come back, are not just going to go lockstep behind the president? But, Allie, I want you to talk about something you actually talked about seconds before we went on air, and that was about this fund, this anti-weaponization fund. Because to my mind, it's like, where's this money coming from? He's just taking $1.8 billion and just pushing it somewhere. But you were telling us that money actually exists in a fund.
That's sort of my understanding. And it came to my attention because when you heard Brian Fitzpatrick in the immediate hours after this fund was announced start talking about, okay, well, we're trying to get our arms around it and figure out where the oversight mechanisms are and where the funding streams are, that made me realize, oh, this might not be a new request that they are making of Congress. They are just creating this out of the fiscal budget that they already have. And I think that's one of the key questions is for Congress, who appropriates the money to these departments, they are trying to figure out where the revenue stream actually is. And so I think that's one of the reasons that people had a lot of confusion about this is, okay, in the $33 billion budget that DOJ had for fiscal year 2026, it's not the one that they're talking about now. It's why Todd Blanche and others are up on Capitol Hill talking about the fiscal year budget for next year. But this is something that it sounds to me like they created of their own volition. And that is why Congress now is having to figure out, okay, how would we even begin to stem this? And is this something that we have to make a law proactively restricting because we cannot say in a different mechanism we're blocking the funding? Well, that's, I think, where the conversation right now on Capitol Hill is instructive.
Right. And as you were talking, I'm remembering maybe a year or so ago, weren't we talking about the fact that Congress would pass something and then the White House would put out a statement saying, I don't care what you guys pass and what it was for. We're going to do what we want.
That it was all sort of funny money, right? And I think that's where it comes into a conversation about the comparisons to a Russian Duma of sorts, right? Like this Congress, I think, in pretty fascinating fashion, has been willing to cede a lot of its authorities to this White House, whether it be on war powers, whether it be on appropriations and funding. And I think this is a moment where Congress could make it that the White House has to actually pay attention to them and take them seriously and not just steamroll over them. But the White House is not going to ask Congress to do that. They are perfectly comfortable with the way that things are and the way that their priorities have flowed. And so this is now a question, to double back to where I began, of is this a moment where lawmakers realize that their political fortunes are different than that of the White House? And is this a moment where they actually choose to exercise this at a time where Donald Trump, and I don't remember who brought this point up, but it's the right one, I think it was you, Eugene, that this is a week where not only did they see their colleague Bill Cassidy see the president be endorse and work against him and lose a primary, but also endorsing Ken Paxton in Texas over John Cornyn, who has been in leadership, who is leadership's current pick for who they think can best win that seat, who, frankly, conventional knowledge in Texas is that it makes it a much less close race if it's Cornyn on the ballot as opposed to Paxton. I mean, that is not divorced from the reality on Capitol Hill, where Republicans are now saying, okay, if you're not going to ride with us, we're going to finally voice some objection, and we'll see if it sticks. I think that you're right to play the mask that you paid, to have the face that you're having. Like, all of that is fair, because past can be prologue. But we are forced to question, is this a moment where it's different?